All right, so yesterday I was talking about the connection between phonemes of the Bubba-Kiki effect, and this is the connection between the sound that we hear subconsciously predicts the shape that we see, and this is a universal trait found in all written languages. So when we convert the sound into a written language, then it reflects the visual meaning of the words. So, for example, the bull, the alpha and the omega in religion is the A and the first and last letters of the alphabet, but it originates from the ideogram of the bull horn. So the spiral horn is the alpha is the cow horn, and the same with omega, and then the bull was the etymology of God. The Indo-European root word of God is actually from the Sumerian word for bull. So you can trace it. They still debate the Indo-European root word of God, what it came from, but Brahman also means bull, and from the Indo-European root of the origin of the Sanskrit. And so so if you go all the way back to the Sumerian, where they worship the bull, and this connects to how the sound of light is a religious experience of the bull. So this is based on the music that they would use, and the ratios for their gods in Sumeria. So the original sin was actually the moon god. That the word sin actually is from the Sumerian word for moon, and so that their moon god was actually the attempt to contain matter as the ratio 5/4, which is the cube root of 2. So they had approximations, using the divide and average mathematics, and the secret that was lost from the ancients is the non-commutative phase. And science actually, there's a term that's called stable chaos in the symmetric logarithmic mathematics of the nonlinear chaos, which is essentially just the irrational number as a time parameter. So it's a nonlinear, and the resonance then is called strong or stable chaos because it's non-commutative, and it creates there's a discontinuity in the phase space. So it's essentially another dimension of time that's non-commutative. So the reason they call it stable chaos is because the time it's a synchronized time as a forced oscillator, but the phase is non-commutative. And this is essentially the same as the music theory secret, that if you have 2/3 and 3/2, that they're both the perfect fifth, but the root tonic has to change because otherwise you have a wavelength that's longer than the root of one, which is essentially the like the original wavelength, the fundamental frequency. And of course, if we listen to the source of sound as music, then it's not a problem because we're not dependent on a materialistic wavelength. And so this is what they mean by the stable chaos, is that the discontinuity of the phase space is actually a dimension of time that we cannot see. And so the non-commutativity is also the secret of solving the relativistic quantum renormalization problem in physics, which is essentially you have two infinities from the divergence of the ultraviolet frequency and the infrared frequency, and the renormalization is essentially because the divergences happen faster than the time frequency uncertainty, then they can cancel out the infinities mathematically. And this is what the Feynman diagrams do, is they show the virtual particles from the negative frequency and reverse time, but they say that they don't exist. Standard physics says that the virtual particles are not real. They don't exist. They're just a mathematical factor that's canceled out through the renormalization. But the problem with this claim is that the experimental physics has already captured and absorbed virtual photons by having creating a mirror from the electromagnetic field as a space-time mirror. You can then absorb the virtual photons from the future and then turn them back into photons. And this is what meditation is doing through the non-commutativity. And so the secret of the non-commutativity, just as Alain Connes explains with the music theory, is that because it's a discrete frequency for the spectrum, and then you're relying on the inverse frequency for the triple spectral, then each 0 point in space is defined by a inherent non-commutative time frequency energy that's the inner cross products in the matrices, the matrix math, the Heisenberg matrices. So the reason this solves the divergence of infinities that otherwise would require renormalization is because since it's discrete, therefore you're using a convergence due to the inverse frequency instead of the divergence of the integrals, as I mentioned in the last video. So that the divergence of the integrals is due to the equipartition principle of the entropy that's supposed to be inherently random from the statistics, but that's already assuming a symmetric spacetime, whereas if you have a non-commutative time frequency, then the phase as spacetime for each 0 point in space is inherently an overlapping of the future and the past, and so the discrete frequency as the negative frequency and reverse time then creates this convergence and as the inherent limitation, and this is also an anti-gravity force. And so the idea is that the black holes have a inherent anti-gravity propulsion to them, so that the whole universe is actually created from a non-commutative anti-gravity harmonization process. And this is also called the torsion field, or torsion, the Einstein-Cartan torsion physics, and which is what the Russians use. And so the Westerners do not accept the torsion physics, except for a few people that have tried to work with it. But otherwise, the non-commutative is the same concept, and it is accepted, so that essentially what was called torsion math is now being converted into the non-commutative mathematics. And so we can see how this truth actually originated from the discrete music of the Pythagorean philosophy, whereby the perfect fifth, what Alan Kahn calls 2-3 infinity, is the fact that the root tonic has to always change as a non-material source of the sound that is listened to, and now it's proven that we can listen faster than time frequency uncertainty, and that the ultrasound then resonates the quantum relativistic microtubules and tubulin of the brain. And so the inherent meaning of reality is this non-local, non-commutative proto-consciousness that Roger Penrose refers to as the source. So even his aperiodic tiling is also due to the non-commutative mathematics. And so the ancients already understood this secret as a whole elaborate science of mind-body transformation, not just the brain or the neurons that are now being realized or originate from what they're calling the stable chaos of the non-commutative phase locking. So as I mentioned in the last video, the difference, it turns out the difference between the 500 milliseconds of a conscious of thinking and the which is an inverse of a 2 hertz frequency. So we think with the left brain, but the right brain is the frequency that then integrates so that's the equivalent of a deep dreamless sleep, or what they call slow sleep wave at 2 hertz. But the reason we're thinking and we're not actually in deep dreamless sleep is because of the phase locking. And so this explains hypnosis also, because if you can disorient somebody's phase locking, then you're essentially putting them into a deep dreamless sleep state of hypnosis. Whereas if somebody is maintaining their phase locking, it's actually due to this stable chaos that is a discontinuity of the phase space and into the non-commutative time frequency as the non-local proto-consciousness from the tubulins and the microtubules. And so it turns out, as I've mentioned in the last video, the main difference between a chimpanzee's brain and a human brain is that we have much greater complexity of the microtubules in the pyramidal neurons, And so the pyramidal neurons is what connects our prefrontal cortex to the thalamus. But the thalamus also relies on the corpus callosum to integrate the right and left brain. So you can think of the prefrontal cortex as the up, the top versus down, and also the back and the front. But the right, when you combine the right and the left, then you have to understand it, you have to go into the fifth dimension as a Mobius strip. And this is what psychologist Stephen M. Rosen is trying to explain in his Mobius strip Klein-Bottle analysis of psychology, that he says that this is the same as Taoism. And I corresponded with him when I did my master's thesis, so he gave me a nice promotional quote for my master's thesis in around 2001. And it turns out that he was greatly influenced by Oliver L. Reiser, and I just discovered this today when I was reading, or maybe yesterday, I was reading the final article of Oliver L. Reiser, who was the basis of what I call the actual matrix plan, and he worked closely with Andrija Puharich. And so what he argued is that the whole universe has this same kind of hierarchical yin-yang dynamic to it based on the electrons and the protons, that he got this from Andrija Puharich also, and that life on Earth is what he calls the lens, the cosmic lens, that it, due to the Schumann resonance, that he got this again from Puharich, that there's a lateral twisting of like a DNA, so you have like a double DNA between the hierarchy of space-time of the universe, and then the quantum consciousness inside the brain in the neurons, and that essentially the two scales overlap due to the he calls it like a double helix. So it's basically he doesn't quite understand the non-commutative math, and neither did Andrija Puharich. So they both relied on the equal tempered music scale, and what Oliver Reiser called it the music logarithmic spiral. And he got that phrase from Esther Watson Tipple, who was the daughter of Thomas Watson, who co-invented the telephone. And so Esther Watson Tipple used to correspond with Einstein, because Einstein supported this work of Oliver L. Reiser, and they worked with the Institute of Advanced Study where Einstein was at Princeton, and they also had a UN think tank, and they were tied in with the Theosophists. And I documented all this as what I called the actual matrix plan, because that was the term that Puharich used, as he called it the matrix. And the idea was that the Schumann resonance energy would be changed on Earth, and that everybody's brains would then be turned into like a quantum computer that then could be used to communicate with the origin of the universe and then help the whole universe evolve. And Michael Persinger, he picked up on Andrija Puharich's research, and he corroborated a lot of it. And I corresponded with Persinger also. I had one of my early correspondents in Brazil. He warned me. He said, I should stop communicating with all these scientists because I'm giving them ideas. And it is actually, there is some, I've noticed some feedback where they do build on my correspondence sometimes and take it into consideration. But again, the common denominator here is what Alan Kahn's discovered, is that entropy actually originates from the non-commutative reverse time and negative frequency, and it's not random, but actually it's unobservable, but we can listen to it through meditation, and therefore we can absorb this reverse time energy as a negative entropy, and that's what drives life, as explained in quantum biology. The source of life is from the same gravitational entropy that causes the quantum entanglement for solar fusion. And so we can